The standard of the world, next. Hi, my name's Adam. Welcome to my classic car channel. Today we have luxury for 1969. In another video you saw the Mark III. Today it's a 69 Eldorado. This Eldorado was produced from 1967 through 1970, and it's the first front-wheel drive Eldorado that came into production. The term was used on some other Cadillacs, but this was the first time it really signified a personal luxury coupe that again was front-wheel drive and shared that front-wheel drive setup with the Tornado. The Eldorado was one of three vehicles that was part of a trilogy, I guess. The Tornado, the Riviera, and this vehicle, the Eldorado. The Tornado and the Eldorado were both front-wheel drive. The Riviera was rear-wheel drive, and they have a lot of differences between them in terms of the chassis. The Toro and the Eldo have a 3/4 frame that stops right in front of the rear wheel, and then they have a single leaf spring rear suspension on either side. The Riviera has a full X frame and has 4 coil springs supporting it. So in spite of this being a really high-end car for the time, to be honest, the ride is not great. And by not great, I don't mean that it's stiff versus soft. This actually is a pretty firm riding car for the time. I really mean that that leaf spring in the back, it creates this sensation of boominess in the cabin as you go over bumps, and it's kind of an unrefined ride, particularly for what this car is. We'll do a comparison test of this versus the 69 Mark III at some point, but I will say on this car, the ride leaves something to be desired, and I owe a lot of that to that single leaf spring in the back. So 69 was the third model year of the Eldorado, 67 was the first year, and each year changes a little bit. In 67, you can tell that one because it has the hideaway headlights, and it doesn't have the turn signals in the fender like this. The turn signals are integrated into the bumper. There's also some other differences between badging. There's not the side marker light that came later on the 67. And nor is there this reverse light that's integrated into the fuel door. So each year you can tell because there's something a little bit different. So as we progress from 67 to 68, the main difference that you'll notice on those is that the turn signal moves from the bumper into the fender. And the interior also changes in 68 to be, I would say, more rich. It's got more wood tone on the doors, has buttons on the seat cushions. In 69, they dropped the hideaway headlights and went to this fixed headlight design. And in addition to the fixed headlights, it also got that backup lamp that was integral to the fuel filler door, which I thought was a kind of a neat touch that some of the Cadillacs today have, like the XT5 is the center backup lamp. Then one big difference between the 69 and 70 that's visible is the taillights on the 70. They're kind of capped off and they only have a really thin red area compared to the 69. And there are some powertrain differences year to year as well. So 67 was the 429 cubic inch Cadillac V8, same block as the 390 Cadillac V8 that came before it. In 1968, though, they introduced the 472 cubic inch premium fuel motor, which is what this car has, and that was the Eldorado standard engine in 1968 and 1969. Then in 70, the Eldorado got the 500 cubic inch V8, and the rest of the Cadillac lineup got the 472, really just as a carryover. But it differentiated the Eldorado from the other models in the line. So you got the 500 cubic inch motor in the Eldorado, you got the 472 in the regular Cadillacs, and that persisted into the mid-70s until I believe 74, when all of the Cadillacs had a 500 cubic inch V8 as standard. These are all premium fuel motors, high compression motors in this body. So 1970 is the only year of the high compression 500 cubic inch engine before in 71 it goes to low compression and a bit less horsepower. This 472 in this car is also a high compression engine, very powerful. I think the 500 cubic inch motor is rated at 400 gross horsepower, and this was rated somewhere around 380 gross horsepower, which again is the horsepower rating absent exhaust and accessories and the air cleaner. When those are added, there's a net horsepower standard that all car companies went to in 1972 and is still used today. So the power figures are a bit inflated, but nonetheless, this is a powerful car. It's also a beautiful car. This was during the height of GM styling, and that trilogy, the Eldorado, Tornado, and Riviera, arguably best exemplifies General Motors at its finest from a styling standpoint. This car actually would be even better without the vinyl roof, but I procured it really because it has this unique color, which is Rampur green. And it reads almost a gray right now in a cloudy, but when it's sunny, it has this deep, rich green, gold, metallic flake color, and it comes alive. It's amazing how this car almost looks like a dark graphite gray right now. But again, in the sunlight, it looks really different. It's just a gorgeous color on the car. It's also a low mileage car. It has, I think, 26,000 miles on it. It was put away in storage in Kentucky, and I bought it and basically resurrected it. It had been stored since 1982, I believe. I got the license plate in the back, hadn't been on the road. And it required a little bit of work to get going, but not really that much, all things considered. The interiors change pretty frequently in these cars too. So the 67 interior and both the seat pattern and the IP is different from the 68. The 68 is different from the 69. This was the first year of this kind of safety padded instrument panel with the rim blow horn that you pinch the rim. It also has the trumpet horn, which is optional. Many times these wheels are all cracked up and in bad shape. This one's perfect, really because it was a garage car for its whole life. Relatively nice interior. I don't know that I would call it overly opulent, though. It's nice, but some of the things on it, like this faux wood grain here on the door, it looks pretty convincing and good, but you'd expect a little more in a car of this expense. Notice the Eldorado has a flat floor. There's no transmission tunnel because it's front-wheel drive. That was a unique selling feature of these. This car is pretty loaded, and I think it has almost every option. It's probably missing a few, but it has the tilt telescoping wheel. So if you want to untelescope it, you move this to unlock, and then you can move the wheel in and out. Also has cruise control with this neat switch on the dash that you turn on before pushing the button at the end of the cruise stalk. It has automatic headlamp dimming, so there's a phototronic eye in the front that you can set. Do you want it to kick on when it senses light far away or near? It has Cadillac's Light Sentinel, which they later relabeled the Twilight Sentinel, and that just kicks your headlights on automatically. Blower style rear defogger, automatic climate control, which automatically selects the fan speed, where the air comes out, which vents, and the temperature, the outlet temperature. AM FM radio with power antenna. So if you want, let me close the door so the key doesn't buzz. But if you want to put up the antenna, you just push this button, and there it starts to go. And you can push it down as well. This car even has a Cadillac 8-track tape player, which I am not about to try for fear of it eating a tape and not working, and I have no idea how to even operate it. So, but it has it. Does have power windows, power door locks, power bench seat with the seat belts, the shoulder belts up on top. And it does have a trunk release. So let's push that and take a look in the trunk. I always thought this wiper control detail here was really interesting on the door, by the way. And it has a trunk light that you can see when the trunk is open. So this is quite a large trunk, and here you go. This was the license plate on the car. When I found it, it had not been registered since 1979, really, because the plate expired in 80. So it wasn't driven for a long time. This car did come standard with dual stripe white wall tires. And a big trunk here. I mean, really big trunk. This does also have the automatic power pull down, where you lower the trunk and you just soft close it and it pulls the trunk lid down all the way. Here you can see the underside of this fuel door with the reverse light that sits over top of the fuel fill in the middle. I always thought this was interesting. Cadillac put this little shock absorber here to give some resistance as you close the trunk. I don't know why. It's actually quite a bit of resistance. So watch this close here. I'm going to just soft close it, and you'll hear it pull it down and click twice. So there it goes. This car does have auto leveling rear suspension as well. And while it's a relatively big car, there is not that much back seat room. For those who are wondering how the back windows operate, you can take a look here. They go all the way in on both sides. So you can have that true hardtop look if you want. Let's take a look under the hood. I always found it interesting that Cadillac rarely did the what I'll call the trapped hood design. In other words, you've got a panel up front here and the hood has a cut line that comes down all the way on three sides. They often, almost always, had this overlap hood that when you closed it was kind of the front of the vehicle. It's even true on that 94 STS there. So this is an undetailed engine bay for a car that was sitting for many years, but nonetheless a low mileage car. When I got it, still had all the original spark plugs, wires. As I mentioned, it has a quadrajet carburetor on it. That's the auto leveling rear suspension, which I've actually unhooked right now. That vacuum hose connects to the hose on the air cleaner, and I have a vacuum a cover that goes over that. I was just working on the carburetor, so I haven't put it back on yet, but I need to rebuild this pump. The gasket around the front side has got a little bit of an air leak, so I've just manually routed the air lines for the rear shocks to a valve that I can air them up on my own. This is the heater valve for the auto climate control, so depending upon how much heat you want, it actually restricts the coolant flow into the heater core with those two vacuum lines. And then the top vacuum line shuts off the flow into the heater core if you have maximum air conditioning commanded. These cars, if you're working on the carburetor, it's really tight to get in there. You have to get a carburetor wrench if you want to get it off. Otherwise it proves to be a bit of a challenge because the air conditioning compressor interferes. Again, this car is front wheel drive, so it's a turbo hydromatic 425 transmission. So there it is back there. The torque converter is behind the motor, and then there's about 1.5 inch thick chain that drives the transmission, which is pointing toward the front of the car on the side here. So this is where the transmission is. It's hard for the camera to focus a little bit. Let's see. But that's the transmission and final drive. And look at the axle shaft. That's the half shaft down there. I mean, that is a beefy half shaft. So this setup was used in the Tornados, the Eldorados, and even the GMC motorhomes of the 70s, those came with the Oldsmobile V8 in this turbohydromatic 425 transmission. But this setup was so strong that it really went into those motorhomes virtually unaltered. And I have not had any issues with, I've owned quite a few cars with this transmission setup, never had an issue with it. It seems very reliable. There's actually a front differential that holds grease, and then the half shafts on either side drive the drive wheels. What's amazing is these are, I don't believe these are equal length half shafts, but the car doesn't have much torque steer. So they must, I think they have counterweights on them to try to negate the torque steer, because this motor has a lot of torque. What's amazing is this car has less torque steer than that car, which if you step on it and you don't have your hand on the wheel, you're going in the ditch. So part of the charm, I guess, of Cadillacs. We'll close the hood. You can see again the hood comes all the way up to the front and wraps around. For whatever reason, Cadillac liked to do that for many, many years, while the other GM divisions and Ford and Mercury often had that trapped hood design, which was harder to execute than this kind of a hood, because here you don't have anything to mesh up with in front of the hood. It's just air. So this is an easier design to execute. This car does have a 3-piece bumper in the front. The 71 Eldorado that preceded it actually had a 5-piece front bumper. So fair amount of complexity. And I can't even imagine how they stamped this trunk with all the compound curves in it. That must have been a high scrap rate piece, or one that had a lot of variation in it. I'll start it up. And this motor is absolutely silent. This has a 2-in, 1-out exhaust and a cobweb. But just a gorgeous car from the peak days of style at General Motors. The next generation Eldorado after this was the 71 to 78, and it grew considerably larger. It was based off of the full-size platform for GM in 71, so it grew longer and wider. It was actually on the widest body that GM had. So this is the only one of the, I'll say, classic Eldorados before the 80s hit that was more of a mid-size as opposed to a full-size car. The subsequent generation was originally going to be on a platform of similar size to this, but given the volumes that this car was selling in, it just was not thought that it was going to be economical to get the economies of scale to have a dedicated platform. And so the Riviera, Tornado, and the Eldorado all moved to the full-size platform for GM in 71, as opposed to having their own. Hope you enjoyed this walk around of my '69 Eldorado. Thank you for watching.